Look at this box. What if I were to tell you that this simple gray box gave joy to millions and millions of people? It influenced entire generations. It entertained countries and brought joys and smiles and memories to many, many, many people. But at the same time, what if I were to tell you that this simple gray box, or maybe you don't know this one, but maybe you know this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. Well, you get my point. What if I were to tell you that this gray box could disappear in the next 10 years? This is a story about DStv, or MultiChoice, or Mnet. I genuinely don't know what to call them at this point. But this is a story about a company that grew to enormous sizes, but then at the end faltered and slowly started to disappear. So to properly appreciate the story of DStv, we must go back to the early 80s with these two men, Koos Becker and Theosin van Sloot. So the story of DStv started then, and this man called Koos Becker was educated in South Africa and left with his wife in the late 70s to study his MBA at the University of Columbia. And during his studies, he was focusing on a thesis, a story of pay TV. And pay TV was still quite new at the time, but then he was inspired by the story of HBO, who had launched this idea of pay TV in 1975. So when he finished his thesis, he came back to South Africa, and he was quite still obsessed with this idea of pay TV, that him and a few of his friends came together and approached Theosin van Sloot. Now, Theosin van Sloot wasn't just an ordinary guy. He was the CEO and chairman of Naspers at the time. And Naspers was a humongous giant in the world of media. They controlled newspapers, they controlled radio, they controlled TV as well. But then Koos Becker had a very different story. He had a very different idea that he wanted to implement in the world of entertainment. And this idea was the idea of pay TV, where subscribers would be paying to watch some exclusive content which wasn't there on the other free-to-air TV that other. Theosin van Sloot, man, this is a very difficult name for me to say. Theosin van Sloot was very intrigued by this idea, and he had proposed to Naspers to start working on their own private TV network, but then the idea had kind of fallen through the weeds over the years. But then this time, they actually went through with it, and in 1986, they launched Mnet, which had about 12 hours of programming per day, and they also had the rights to the Rugby Currie Cup, which is quite a big deal, particularly for the audience that they were going after, which was the white middle class Afrikaners at the time, because this is a company that was based in South Africa after all. And if you wanted to introduce a pay TV system, you had to be speaking to people who had the money to actually. So initially, when Mnet was launched, it was a little bit quite scruffy, because they also had to be the decoders to those gray boxes that we talked about initially. They had to be manufactured in South Africa, and they faced a lot of problems when they were doing it. Some of the remotes had to be imported from the United States, and they were facing like fires in their factories which affected their production. But nevertheless, they still managed to get it done, with the first batch of decoders being 500, and the following batch they started to grow and grow and grow, and the next batch in 1987 that was 50,000, and then in 1988 they had grown to 100,000. So now let me explain how the early decoders work. Like Mnet essentially will be broadcasting signals that would require for you to have the decoder, and you could only have the decoder if you were one of the subscribers, and the decoder would unscramble these signals that are broadcasted by Mnet, and then you're able to watch things on your TV. So it was quite different from the setup that we have now with DStv, with satellite dishes, all of that jazz. All of that came today. But then at the time, this still had its own problems. They had problems with piracy, where sometimes people will find a way to get around the decoder system and find a way to get all of this pay TV for free. And they also had a lot of problems managing their own company, because now you had a company that was doing two types of functions, but then it's still one company, which was Mnet, right? So on one hand, you have to manage all the production of the decoders, manage all the subscriptions, the installations, the support, and the headaches that come from dealing with that. And then on the other hand, you're also dealing with content production, you're dealing with rights ownerships, actors, directors, all of that stuff you're dealing with it separate. So you can see how much this can slowly start to get a little bit overwhelmed. So Mnet's choice to, you see the pun intended, Mnet's choice to separate the function of the companies was actually like a really smart, prompted what we're going to talk about next, which is something that was unexpected, but it's what actually grew the company to massive heights that they managed to get to. And you can only find that about that but in the next chapter. So in the early 90s, MultiChoice launched DStv, which was a massive game changer, because it changed the way that TV was going to be done in Africa forever. So, like we said initially, that the decoders that we needed were operating on an analog system where Mnet would be broadcasting the signals, which would later got descrambled by the decoder, and then you could watch your TV. But then they got a new thought. What if instead of all of that, what if you had a satellite dish, and the satellite dish was receiving signals from the sky essentially? So they had like satellites that were out orbiting in space, and these satellites would be broadcasting the signals, and you could essentially from anywhere with receive that signal with your satellite dish, and then get the decoder to unscramble that signal if you are a paid user, and then now you're able to access and watch whatever show it is that you want to watch. This came as a very like welcome development, because it's the one piece of technology that managed to help multi-choice scale up to so many countries, because that's when you see them starting to expand their services to countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Angola, Mozambique, Malawi, Tanzania. They started to spread to so many countries, because they enable their customers to essentially be able to be subscribed to whatever service that they were going to be subscribed to now, because they had satellite dish, and the picture quality was also like like widely improved. And I remember even as a little child that during the early mid to early 2000s, that's when like the DSTVs, the satellite dishes, they started to pop up everywhere, and you know everyone in the neighborhood, at least like 10 people, they had satellite dishes, and you could go watch wrestling there. So this is the time when DStv really started to grow, and they would have a lot of subscribers. And one of the packages that ensured their insane growth was the compact package, which allowed them to access more and more users, because it was much more affordable. So that's when you see my multi-choice slowly start to grow from 500,000 users to 1 million users to 20 million users to 48 million users in 2018. So that's the trajectory of growth which the satellite dish actually put them on. And this was such an unprecedented amount of growth, which for any company would be a godsend. But then also you'd have to remember that the insane amount of growth come with its own types of pressures. As the growth happens, the pressure also tends to increase to try to innovate. And we remember a lot of innovations that had been tried by DStv, like the DStv Go app. But then nobody ever really speaks about them anymore because maybe they didn't work out all that well. But to be fair to MultiChoice, they really did try to innovate because they also introduced the PRV decoder, which could have internet access and allowed you to pause live TV and to save your viewing options, all of those things. That's what came from all of that growth that they were experiencing. But then in 2007, there was something that was happening in Scotts Valley, California, that would later turn out to break this company. And when I say break this company, I mean it literally, because that's the only way that you can put into view the things that have transpired since that day in 2007, from an event that was happening in Scotts Valley, California. So let's talk about what that event was. Okay, so we've talked now about the rise of the DStv and how everything began. And so now we have to talk about the sad part. We have to talk about how the empire slowly started to fall off. And this is the most interesting part of the video because I know people think that they know what happened, but a lot of the time there's like small things in the details that we tend to miss, right? So to talk about the actual fall off of DStv, we have to talk about three particular things. The first thing that we have to talk about is the studio deals and how they have changed and evolved over time. And then the second thing that we need to talk about is streaming. How has streaming changed the game of DStv and made the operating environment much more difficult for them? And I know it sounds obvious, but trust me, we really gotta get into it. And then the third thing that we need to talk about is how has the EPL deal that was truly the backbone of for DStv. How has that affected the company, and how will this affect the future of the company? Okay, so the first thing that we need to talk about is the studio deals. So the way that it works with production studios that they deal with in Hollywood is that these studios, they produce these shows, and then DStv or MultiChoice approaches them, and then they say to them, okay, we want to air these shows. So how much are you going to charge us for us to have exclusive rights to air the shows in a particular region? Maybe if they say they want to air the shows in Africa for per se, then MultiChoice can bid for those rights. But then initially, when these deals type of deals started, it was just licensing fees where you go to them and be like, I wanna exclusive rights to air this thing in this particular area, and then you pay them a licensing fee, and then you could get to just deal with the content. But then as studios started to get big, because the way that the studios have been operating for a long time is that the bigger studios slowly start to buy out the smaller studios because it'll be easier to operate because of the economies of scale, you see. So you take for example Warner Brothers, they have been buying out a lot of other studios over time. And then if you take for example Disney, always has been buying other studios, and slowly, fewer and fewer companies they've started to disappear and swallowed up by these humongous studios. I'm pretty sure maybe I should make a video about it one day. But then when the studios get swallowed up, the leverage when it comes to making deals with distributors is slowly starts to skew towards the studios themselves, because now they've like slowly moved from we just give you a licensing fee and then you pay that and then you get the exclusive rights to air. But then they have slowly started adding other conditions to it where they say, okay, we're going to charge you a licensing fee. Then after that, we also want to charge you to put in to get into a revenue sharing agreement with you. And not only are we going to be doing the revenue sharing agreement, we want the right to audit your subscribers so that we can be sure that we're getting a fair deal with you when we're talking about the subscriptions. And as every year goes by, more and more money gets charged to the distributors like DStv. So not only are they paying more money, um, the rate at which it's happening, it's increasing. So you find that that's why DStv was also increasing its prices every year. It was because the amount of money that they were paying to get the content to deliver to the people was also increasing. But then not only that, when studios started to launch their own streaming services, and when there started to be the emergence of many other streaming services, the amount of people that are interested in buying the content, the amount of people that are interested in using the content now increases. So not only does the amount of money that you get charged to distribute the content increase, but then the amount of content that they are offering you is now reduced because a lot of it has to be prioritized for their own TV shows, and a lot of it has to be shifted for premiering to now only premiere on their shows, and then you get the rights to those shows afterwards. So slowly, the studios start to gain more and more leverage. Not only are they increasing the prices at which you're getting the content that you were getting, they're now just reducing the content that you were also getting to begin with. So you would find that for some movies and TV shows, by the time that they get out of the cinema cycle, they are now free to air. So DStv, even if they're paying, they're not really going to be making a lot of money from those movies and those TV shows, because a lot of time has passed between when the hype was there to watch those shows to where they are now. So now let's talk about streaming. Netflix introduced streaming in 2007. So in this introduction of streaming was not a profitable business to be in. Netflix was spending a lot of money while trying to do it, and I'm not sure which was the first year that Netflix actually became profitable, but they were not profitable for a very long time. That is because it was difficult to get enough subscribers to be paying for this content, and it was costing them a ginormous amount of money to get people to get access to this content. So with the increase of the of streaming services, it's becoming more and more difficult for distributors and TV distributors like DStv to be able to negotiate the deals that would get them this content and at the same time to be able to fight off these streamers, because the deal proposition that streaming brings to the table itself is actually enormous. It's actually probably much way better than the the, the, the business proposition that DStv itself can bring. You can watch anything from anywhere at any time on whatever device that you want to watch, but it's damn near impossible for me, who's living in the middle of Asia somewhere, to watch my DStv shows that I will be paying for every month. So the mobility is kind of limited because of the whole of the types of deals that they made with the content producers, which say, oh, we are paying for content distribution in this particular region. So they kind of have to make sure that if I want to watch whatever I'm watching on whatever device I'm watching it on, I must be on the continent of Africa. And sometimes you can't even bypass that with a VPN. But then you compare this with your Netflix, you compare this with your Hulu, your HBOs, you can literally just watch anything from anywhere. So I know at this point in the video, you still think that, oh, well, they do have the advantage because they have the live sports and they still have that, right? But then that's the third thing that we still need to talk about. This EPL deal that was keeping DStv and MultiChoice alive for so long. The EPL deal, I think, is probably one of the most expensive things that DStv was paying for in their balance sheets for the longest of times. I think they were paying something like 400 million for about this. I think it's a 3-season cycle, if I'm not mistaken. 3-season or 5-season cycle. I have to check with that one. But then, because they were paying so much money, they were able to recoup it because they would have the distributing rights for the EPL in the whole of Africa. So that will keep subscriptions going for services like SuperSport and whatnot. People would be subscribing just purely so that they can be able to watch the English Premier League. But then recently, they lost those rights in a bidding war with Bain Sports. So Bain Sports won the rights to distribute to Africa for the EPL, and so DStv kind of has to discontinue the services for subscribers that are outside of South Africa, because then they went and subleased the distribution rights for South Africa from Bain Sports. So even in the sporting arena, the dominance of the DStv is slowly starting to dwindle. And as time goes by, there's going to be more and more democratization in the sporting arena, where other parties are able to offer a better sports package via the internet, where you're able to watch whatever sport, whenever sport, however sport. And this has been the lifeline for SuperSport, for DStv for so long. So this is the final nail in the coffin. But then, and everything else that you're going to be starting to see in the headlines. For example, at the time of recording the studio, I think there's a bidding war for Warner Brothers, between Netflix and Oracle. I think it's one of the owners of Oracle that are interested in getting into the bidding war. So now you watch that happen. If that deal goes through, or even if it doesn't go, there are going to be more and more changes in the entertainment landscape that are going to be affecting DStv as a whole. And with the recent acquisition of DStv by Canal Plus, my own thoughts are that this can only get worse. So what is my conclusion on this video about DStv? Let me think about that for a second. So, oftentimes, when we hear about news relating to big companies, we often easily go to the statements of like, oh, the board failed to innovate, or this company didn't listen to the users, or this company wasn't quite agile enough, and they should have seen this coming, and they didn't prepare for the future, and all of that hula baloo. But then a lot of things get lost in times like that. A lot of things get lost. A lot of context is lost. A lot of fingers are pointed, but no one really ever goes and asks themselves like, what really could they have done? Because there's a lot of complexities that come with running the type of business that DStv has been running for decades now. There's a lot of things that there's so many factors that are out of your control, that you can only focus on the things that you are able to do. You can't control the way that Disney and Warner Bros. Are going to manage their content. You can't control the way that this company or this country is going to fund their sporting endeavors. You can't control really much of a lot of things. You can only control the type of content that you produce, and the type of information that you're going to be curating, that you're interested in curating. That's as far as your control goes. But a lot of the time, it's really out of your hands. Sometimes maybe the curtain is shut and the fat lady is singing, and it's over.